Hi, Pat. Welcome to the Spiritual Context Podcast.
Good morning, Bishal.
I'm very excited to talk with you today about many things about your Quaker faith and especially about receiving guidance and your understanding of God. But to get us started, would you bring us to the moment when you received the guidance to change your major?
Well, if I wanted to start right at the moment, I was sitting in meeting for worship at Earlham College, and I had a bacteriology experiment running in the lab that I needed to get back to. It was timely, and I was feeling impatient. And I got this guidance that I should change my major and that I shouldn't be sewn into the lining of a lab coat for the rest of my life. Now, none of that makes sense to me. And I went to my advisor and I told her I'm going to change my major. And she said, sure, I'll sign the paper because you'll come back. But I didn't.
And you were a pre-med major at that
I
point.
was a pre-med major. So there I was. What was I going to do now? If I'm not a biology major for pre-med, and I've already put in 2 years of intensive science and math courses, just the basic required humanities classes, what could I major in and still graduate on time? Well, I wanted to take a couple of religion classes because I had several months earlier left the Catholic Church, and there's all this doctrine, all these rules, all this, etc. I didn't know how to evaluate them. Which ones were bedrock, which ones I didn't have to deal with anymore. And I needed to take some religion courses to help sort that out. Therefore, in order to graduate on time, I became a religion major. And that's a lot about how I get led from one thing to another. It's like, what? And then it leads to the next thing, and here I am.
Well, first, yay for a religion major because that's what I teach. But I'm very curious. So when you say you received the guidance and that you would not want to be sewn into the stitches of the lab coat, was that what you received?
The lining of the lab coat.
The
I
lining.
didn't think lab coats have linings, but whatever. That was the message.
Was it so? Would you describe what is the experience like? Is it a thought? Is it a voice that you hear? Is there a certain sensation that goes with receiving a guidance? How do you know it is a guidance? What does it feel like?
It's a voice in my head. It's not auditory, but it's plain English. Most of the time, when I get guidance, I try to see if it'll go away. Give it a test, see if it's there for me, whether it's something I'm really supposed to follow. I don't remember how much I debated that after I got that guidance and meeting. I know I went to the lab and checked my bacteria. Yeah, these things come to me and I do various things to test them. I'll ask other people that I trust. Um, I give it plenty of time to go away. If it comes back, then I have to see what I do next.
Hmm. So because there are many voices in the head, in what we call our mind, right? These are voices of fear, voices of desire, voices of anger, longing, all kinds of voices going on. And I'm very curious, how is it that you discern among those voices, this is a guidance? And you said you have various ways to test it. Could you tell us what are some of those ways?
Okay, well, the first one is let it go away. It's almost never something I go, oh, goody, I'd really like to do that. Um, I'll sit with it. I'll reflect on it. I'll write in my journal about it. Sometimes I give it a lot of time. I'll talk to other people. At various stages in my life, I've had what we Quakers call, well, I have occasional trouble finding the right word, the words that I know. Elders, that is, people who will sit with you and midwife your spiritual life, help draw it out. So I've been fortunate to have people who will do that with me. And one good friend whose name is Lee, whom I have been friends with for more than 50 years, whenever I'm fretting about how to do something, she'll say, Pat, they're not so much interested in what you say as the presence you bring. And that just snaps me back into where whatever I'm doing is supposed to be coming from. Now, Larry here doesn't know anything about Lee, but he read a little prayer for me this morning that essentially said that.
Well, tell us about Larry and what Larry's purpose, the purpose of Larry's presence is today during our interview.
Well, Larry's a relatively new friend. We both live in the same senior living complex, and I've met him less than a year ago. And we invited him and his wife to dinner, and in the conversation, I just had the sense that even though he is a devout Catholic, somehow we were on the same spiritual wavelength. And so we have met most Monday mornings for an hour or a long hour or a longer hour, talking about our spiritual lives and the outward ways that we live them out.
And he's here today
I asked
too.
Larry to be my elder for this, something he never heard about before. But he was game, and so here we are.
So he said a prayer for you, and while you are doing this interview, I believe the term, I was looking up Quaker terminologies, I believe the term is he's holding you in light. Yeah. So he's praying for you. He's holding you in light and holding the interview, the process in light as you were doing this. And I will come back to guidance again and again. I think that is the central thrust of our conversation today. And so the guidance you received to change your major, that was a verbal guidance. And you've talked about way opening, way closing, bait and switch. And you've also talked about your own laziness as a form of guidance. So I want to talk about all of that as we move forward. But before that, would you bring us to another pivotal moment in your life? This was when you were 8-year-old. And you were receiving your first communion. What happened then?
So there I was in the fall of my third grade year, sitting in St. Rose Church in New Lexington, Ohio, a little church in a little town. I was a student in the Catholic school since first grade and had had all the instruction leading up to this becoming an adult in a way by being old enough to receive my first communion. And I took it all very seriously. So I went up, I received the host, I went back to my place, and I'm kneeling there. And I'm overwhelmed with this sense that God is present with me. What I later have referred to as a Kundalini experience, just very powerful. And I didn't make a lot of it. I assumed that all the other children were having a similar experience. But it, for me, became a bedrock. I knew that the divine was there all the time. My thoughts about who or what God, the divine, the energy of the universe, whatever that is, it's there. It's not going away. I have a relationship with it. I didn't talk to anybody about that until I was 42 years old. Because, well, first I didn't think it was remarkable. I figured everybody had it. Then somewhere I figured out that wasn't quite true. I didn't know how to talk about it. I may have mentioned it to my mother, who was a very practical woman and probably said, "Go set the table." So it felt like something not to talk about. So when I was 42, my husband and I took a year off. We went and stayed in a community in Northern California. And there was another person I was told, "Oh, you're going to be so excited. This other person from the East is here and you'll be glad to see him." And I went, "Him? I do not like this person." But he and his wife invited me and my husband to lunch, and we went for a walk after lunch. My husband was walking with his wife. I was walking with him. And suddenly I knew that if I told Ross about my experience, he would understand it and resonate with it. So for the rest of his sojourn in Santa Rosa, California, which was half of the time that I was there, we met regularly and talked about these matters. And after we both moved to the East, he was actually living in Florida at the time, but his daughter was in Philadelphia and he came periodically. So we met by phone, and he and I got to talking about who else is out there who needs to talk about this that doesn't have a place to do it. And he had read an article in a little Quaker women's publication that his wife had from this woman who spoke of her mystical experience, how her husband, the physician, thought she'd lost her mind and put her in a mental hospital. And the three of us, she was by then not in the mental hospital, the three of us, Ross, and she, and her name will come back to me, and I, began to conspire about how to create opportunities for other people to talk about their dramatic spiritual experiences.
So I want to return to 8-year-old. When you had this experience and you knew that it was the presence of the divine, was it,
At least I thought so.
Yeah, how would you characterize it? Was it an overwhelming sense of silence or peace or love or light?
It felt as though my chest was expanding and might explode.
And how long did this last?
Probably not long.
And have you had...
The mass proceeded, but the afterglow of it hung around. But I have to tell you, I don't remember a lot of details about that day.
Have you had similar experiences since?
It's so hard to know because it has become a lifetime thing. But I will remember one time, it was in the 1990s, I was in Montana, and the place where I was staying was in a bowl where there were tall mountains all around, but it was relatively flat where I was. And it was before supper time, and I decided to go for a walk, even though it was very cold out. And I found myself just standing there, feeling as though my aura was expanding to the limits of the valley. And I stood there for one of those timeless moments. I don't know if it was a tenth of a second or a half hour. But then it was time to dinner and I went back in.
And once you established the journal, many people shared these experiences, I presume, similar experiences.
Yes, we had some public gatherings. We had some weekend retreats. We had a small magazine that went from the early 90s and just went out of business a month or two ago, where people could share these stories.
And it also seems remarkable to me that you've had, I suppose you would call them elders, but spiritual companions like Ross, like Larry, like Lee, throughout your life, who've supported you, or you've supported them. What do you see as the value of having such a companion? Have you sought them out, or have you just received them like receiving guidance?
Yeah, I think I mostly just received them. And it is mutual. I have a favorite quotation. I saved a couple of things, but I don't have that with me. So I'm going to mess it up. It's by a Quaker woman named Mary Rose O'Reilly. And it was on the cover of a Quaker magazine, the French Journal, in the 1990s. And, somewhere in the 90s. And it says, if somebody sits with me and prays with me and talks with me about the divine, and a few other lines, I live more fully and bravely in sacred time. So I find that companionship to be part of the source. And for some years now, I've been leading a group for people in my meeting, my Quaker meeting in Newtown, Pennsylvania. And periodically they ask me, why are you doing all this work? I mean, why are you doing this for me? And I say to them, I'm not doing this for you. I need you and then I read the whole quotation to them so that I can live more fully and bravely in sacred time.
Yeah, it reminds me of, you may be familiar with the 12-step programs, 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Yeah, and step 12 is continuing to help others to become sober, but it's really so I can stay sober, so I can be sober. And part of being sober, remaining sober, is helping others. That's what enables me to be sober. So being that for others enables you to be connected to the source. And there are so many other parallels with, I don't know if this is characteristic of all of Quaker life or just you, but many things I see parallels between the 12 steps and your way of living. I want to bring us to another moment in your life, and this is when you first went to a Quaker meeting. How did that come about?
Well, that's the lazy one. So in August of my after my freshman year in college, I was clear that I needed to leave the Catholic Church at least temporarily. And I spoke with a priest friend who, I don't know if his bishop would have liked this, but he said, do what you need to do. Just don't just drink coffee and eat breakfast while on Sunday morning or read the newspaper. Worship God. So I get back to Earlham College, which is a Quaker-based college, but I didn't know anything about Quakers. And I asked myself, where am I going to go to church? I had no idea. How do you pick a church? I don't know. But the Stout Memorial Meeting House was about 500 feet from my bed. So I thought, okay, I can go there. And I didn't take the full immersion in Quaker meeting. There was a silent Quaker worship at 9 o'clock, where I think the grown-ups went. And then at 11, there was all college worship, which was for the students. And it was broken into 3 parts, the first of which was readings and hymns, and with space in between them, some quiet in between them, for about 20 minutes. Then for about another 20 minutes, somebody gave a message, a sermon, if you will, a different person every week, and once a semester, a senior student. So one time I got to do it. And then 20 minutes of silence. I found that very comfortable. The preliminaries, this I love to sing, the preliminaries, the readings helped me to get grounded. Sometimes I got a lot out of whoever was speaking, sometimes not. But I had all this fullness then to carry into the quiet for the 20 minutes. So I don't have a stunning recollection of that first day, but I do have a sense that it fit me. And so I very faithfully attended all college meeting for the rest of my student life at Earlham College. And I didn't think of myself as a Quaker. I thought of myself as a student participating in the student meeting for worship.
It's many people would consider their laziness as a shortcoming, something I should get over, right? And in your case, at least retrospectively, you were looking at it as a form of guidance, which makes me then say, should I really be working on what I call my shortcomings, or should I follow those inclinations to see where they take me?
I don't know whether you should do that or not. I think you should discern when you should follow your shortcomings.
But is that the only instance where you would think your shortcoming was a guidance, or have there been other instances as well?
I don't think I've thought of things in that way, so I don't have a good answer to that.
But it is quite interesting to me, and because of the other forms we will talk about too, there seem to be 2 things, right? One, I can look back at my own life, and I can see that regardless of what the mind was saying, the purpose of events are, why I am going there, why I am doing this is why I'm making this decision, something else was underway. There was some other story that was unfolding, a story told from maybe a higher perspective that was unfolding that I wasn't aware of. And I can maybe intuit it in retrospect that, oh, I was going there for this reason, or that happened for this reason. But I was completely unaware of it when it was going on. So that's one way to look back and to realize, oh, that was a guidance. But then the question then, how do I then institute that? Now that I see that that was a guidance, how do I institute that in making decisions moving forward in the future? How do I make the best decision moving forward in the future? So do I use my laziness as a form of guidance? Do I use thoughts in my mind as a form of guidance? So one of the forms is way opening, way closing. So for instance, if I'm trying to, if I am attempting an endeavor and I keep running into a roadblock, do I see that as way closing, therefore a guidance, or do I see that as guidance to persist despite difficulties? Do you see the conundrum that the mind is producing?
One thing comes clear to mind. At around the turn of the 21st century, I felt clear to work on issues regarding the environment and climate change. And I did some small things in my home meeting context. I kept trying to find a way to connect to a larger group where I could be useful, and nothing ever materialized. I just couldn't find a place to plug in. So now something did happen, had nothing to do with those efforts, but a Quaker building complex in the downtown Philadelphia that has an 1860 something meeting house and an office building and a daycare center and a bunch of stuff going on, needed renovation. And the executive director and the chair of the board were talking who could help them raise enough money to do the renovation. And the chair of the board, a very close friend of mine, said, let's ask Pat McBee. And the executive director said, she'll never do it. And my friend John said, she will if it's going to be a green building. So all my other efforts, way closed. I gave it up, the heck with it. And then here I was, I spent 3 years going around lecturing about green building as a way to raise money.
I guess, okay, I see what you're saying.
That was way closing and way opening.
Yes.
And the bait and switch, all of those things happened for me.
Yeah. So the question then the next question that comes to mind is a lot of what in your spiritual life, it seems a lot of your spiritual life is receiving guidance, receiving spiritual companions, and in this case, receiving this opportunity. So how do you see the role of effort, role of my part? If a lot of spiritual life is me receiving, passively receiving, what is the active part of myself in my spiritual life?
I see two levels in your question. One is, how do I cultivate my spiritual life?
Mm-hmm.
And the other is, how do I express it? Are you looking for both of those or
Yes.
which one?
Yes.
Okay. So cultivating, I'm not, talk about lazy. I have never had consistently a daily practice where I get up at a certain time and do a certain thing and do it this way and do it every day. Doesn't happen. Tends to be more spasmodic, sometimes for intense periods, sometimes not conscious effort very much at all for a while. My best and deepest cultivation is journaling. And I often will have a dialogue where I'll ask questions and then write down the answers that came from someplace other than me. So we're sharing with companions, and journaling are my deepest forms of cultivation. But I have a lot of expression. So for a period of time, the 80s, 90s, aughts, I often wrote articles for the magazine Friends Journal that covered things like climate change, spiritual disciplines, marriage as a spiritual discipline. My husband and I, for 35 years, 3 to 5 times a year, led retreats for married couples on deepening their relationship. It was not remedial. It was for couples who felt they had a good marriage and would like to deepen it. I'm leading this group in my meeting now. For 46 years, I was a member of Central Philadelphia Meeting in that meeting house in that complex of Quaker buildings. And I think I held almost every office in that meeting, including clerk of the meeting, which is, we don't have a paid pastor, so this is the person who at least organizes the business meetings and is the connection point for communication. And after my time of being clerk, I often served as an elder to subsequent clerks. So there are a lot of ways where I have expressed my spiritual life.
And silence, the meetings that you attend, Quaker meetings, big part of that is silence. So do you see silence as a cultivation as well?
Yes. And it's something I think I'll still be learning about for as long as I can still work on it. What happens for me in the silence has changed enormously over time.
I'd love to hear about it. Yes.
I loved a period whenever I settled, a song came into my mind.
Huh.
Often it was a hymn. Sometimes it was the Beatles or some other extraneous why that, which became a focal point for it's not quite meditation, but my listening was around that music. Sometimes I have had periods when I feel very connected to the divine. Almost out of body. One experience I had in meeting for worship was a vision. I'm not given to visions. I think it's my only vision. And my vision was I was sitting in the middle of a forest facing a forest glade, a meadow. And the vision kindly provided a bench for me to sit on. So I've got the forest behind me, the beautiful sunlit glade in front of me, and I received the message that I was perfectly safe. perfectly, totally safe. Now it pointed out that in the forest behind me there were wild beasts that could tear me limb from limb at any moment. But nonetheless, I was perfectly safe. And this has been a bedrock thing for me ever since. That bad things can happen. I can get sick. I can lose somebody. I could lose a job. I did that once. And I'm still okay. I can sit and wait for the next thing. I'm not at risk. There was an occasion when my husband was in the emergency room and it wasn't clear what was happening or how serious it was. And a nurse walked by and gave me this, oh, poor dear look, which I thought, oh, this could be bad. And I sat there and I thought, okay, he could die. He could be disabled and be life-changing for him and me both. Or it's just an episode. Whatever it is, he'll get over it and life will go on. And I sat there comfortably envisioning how I would be in any of those scenarios, all of which I was prepared to accept.
Yeah, safety isn't the absence of adversity or dangers, but rather safety in the midst of it, regardless of what is going on. One spirit is safe, one has the capacity to face it.
I'd like to point out that it was just an episode. I still have the husband.
I'm reminded of the 91st Psalm, which is very dear to me, but that's how I think of the 91st Psalm. He who dwells in the protection of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Yeah. You had, last time we talked, you had a list of facts, I want to say, a list of things about the Quaker faith. Do you have that, or do you remember what were in those?
I wrote them down. I lost it. I thought, you're going to ask me this question. So I thought about, well, what should I say? And I actually wrote something down again, so I can be a little bit coherent. First, I need to say that there are various branches of the Religious Society of Friends, and they run the spectrum from evangelical conservative Christianity to a highly liberal, diverse, theologically diverse group. I'm part of that group. There are a few things that I think are common to all the branches of Quakerism in one way or another. The first is a fundamental belief that each individual has direct access to the divine, that there is no need for a priest or a minister or some other intermediary for you to be in relationship with God, however you perceive God. That relationship, and that relationship will guide you, and you can trust and follow that guidance. And a similar piece is that of God in every person. The belief that there is that of God in every person, and that you can relate to that person on that level. A dear friend of mine who was my teacher and just recently died would, when he would read about some heinous crime in the newspaper, his love would go to the perpetrator. believing that, asking himself what happened to that person that has so clouded the inner spirit in that person. And I can't say I do this every day all the time, but I try to relate to the people I meet, not just to the way they present themselves to me, but knowing there's a deeper something in them that they may or may not be able to access. And in the movie, where the nun is visiting regularly a person on death row, and he's blowing her off and blowing her off. Finally, not long before his execution, he got it. He found himself. So it's there, I believe, in everybody, and sometimes very accessible, and sometimes pretty hidden in people who have been in some way scarred or distorted by life. But that doesn't mean I have to dislike them or reject them because of the damage that they've experienced.
So those were...
Okay, those are two things. Yeah, I lost track of where I was. Sorry. So there's that of God in every person. There is access to the divine by everyone. Now, in our liberal branch of Quakerism, we settle into silence to listen for the guidance of the Spirit. Anyone may rise and speak if they receive guidance that they believe to be for the well-being of the community. That's not to say that everybody stands up to speak is in the deepest possible spiritual space, but we receive it as best we can. I often pray, let them say what they're meant to say, and let me hear what I'm meant to hear. Then we settle back and reflect on what we've heard. It's not a dialogue. It's not a conversation. And as I said previously, this process of going deep is a lifelong endeavor. My current experience of meeting for worship, which I was comforted to have another older friend say to me, and I thought, oh, there's two of us, is if I close my eyes in worship, I fall asleep. Doesn't matter how well rested I am, what kind of spiritual preparation I did that morning, I fall asleep. I'm very embarrassed about that. But so I try to keep my eyes open. So the meeting for worship has taken many forms for me over, I think it's 59 years since I started worshiping with friends.
First of all, I'd like to say, and maybe it's in different ways for you and for me, but my experience also often with meditation or silence is I tend to fall asleep. In fact, when I was in Columbus, Ohio, I used to go to Newman Center, the church there by the Ohio State University, and they had Father Vinny had a centering prayer group that met on Tuesday afternoons, every Tuesday afternoon, and I would go, and every time for 5 years, every Tuesday afternoon, I napped.
You had a good nap.
And that's also happened when I've gone to longer retreats, like 10-day long retreats. The first 5 day, not only when I was sitting to meditate, but even when I was walking, I would have difficulty keeping my eye open. It would be very intensely like pulling sleep, heavy, heavy. So yes, you're not alone. But then the question is, are you able to access the silence even with your eyes closed? Eyes open, sorry. Are you able to access the silence even with your eyes open during a meeting, but also as you go about your daily life? Has the silence grown?
Yes, all of the above. A way of being present in a Quaker meeting. The Quaker meeting is not just me and God. You know, you settle into the silence and it's you grooving on God. There's all the other people in the room too. So one of the things commonly done is to look around the room and express love for everybody or specific somebody's in the room. And one of the roles of the Quaker elder, particularly in earlier Quaker times, was to draw the ministry out of, to pay attention to the people who you can see it in their face that something's happening. And just pray that whatever that is will come out to the benefit of the whole gathered group. So that's one of the things I can do that feels authentic and appropriate when I'm not going to sleep.
And returning to when you were 8-year-old, that experience you had, that was during your first confirmation when you received communion. And I'm assuming you no longer receive communion in the same way?
Well, among Quakers, there is no physical sacraments.
Mm-hmm.
There is a belief that there is a communion with God and with the others in the room.
So communion is still happening, not necessarily through a physical sacrament, but you're communing in the presence, in silence,
With
in the
God,
gathering.
with the other people.
Mm-hmm. To love God with all your heart, with all your mind, and the second is like to it, to love your neighbor as yourself.
I learned that one in first grade.
And in reading things, materials that are available that you've written online, you also often refer to other religions. For instance, I've seen you refer to Taoism in talking about preparing for receiving guidance. Let the water settle so the right action arises by itself. Or you've talked about Buddhism and loving kindness meditation. And earlier you referred to Kundalini energy. How do you understand the multiplicity of religions?
Oh, I like that one. Well, first of all, back when I was still in college, but dealing with this change in my religious practice, I took 2 courses in religions of Asia. One was East Asia, one was the Middle East. And I was looking for the places where things intersected. So if they showed up in more than one place, then I thought, well, there's one. Check that one off. That one's probably a good one. So that was my beginning introduction to studying about religions other than either Catholicism or Quakerism.
So you're saying if the same teaching or principle or practice showed up in multiple religions, then you would say that's likely to be true.
That's likely to be true. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
There is so much in all the religions that are useful to the practitioners, but are not useful to other people in some way. I wanted to find the kernels that I could hold on to. The golden rule is one that people talk about a lot, how it shows up slightly different iterations in many traditions. So then also I have felt free to study other religions at various times. It is not in conflict with my being a Quaker. I read a book that a person a Catholic man, had a very profound spiritual experience. And he wrote this book. It sounded like he was mostly trying to say, really, it's all right. I'm still a good Catholic, not to worry. And as I read, I thought, I'm so glad I'm a Quaker, because I don't have to justify how I encounter the divine. So I read off and on. Sometimes I don't read anything important for a long time, and then I'll dig into a whole bunch. I have a little book called The Enlightened Heart, where the editor just chose his favorite quotations, starting with the Upanishads through the Old Testament to contemporary times. And there's a lot of Lao Tzu in there. I just enjoy those things. I find them energizing.
And the question that I would have wanted to ask you anyway, but you said I should ask you too, is how has your understanding of God evolved over time? So you said you've always believed in God since that experience when you were 8 years old. You've never gone through a period of atheism or agnosticism, yet your understanding has taken multiple forms. It has evolved. So what are the different stages, if we can map it in that way?
Let me just do something for my voice. That helps it get clearer. As a child, really as a teenager, I had the Sistine Chapel in mind, the white-haired guy on this cloud, somewhere up there, who sometimes is loving and sometimes judging, and you needed the priest to connect the phone line. In my early post-Catholic period, I was very unclear about how to think of God. And somewhere in my 20s, I settled on God is love. And the quotation in the Epistle of John, God is love, and he, so to speak, who lives in love, lives in God and God in him. And I thought, I can do that. I can do at least that. And because I know what love looks like, I know when it's around. And so that's a hint to me that God is present, at least there. I regarded it as an inadequate theology, but a good enough theology until I had something better. And then I had my period where I fell into reading women's theology. And that was the closest to atheism I got. I picked up a book where a woman was orphaned at birth. Her mother died in childbirth, and she spent her life looking for that mother. And then her book was about how that's true of Christian women who are indoctrinated in a male point of view. And as I read more and more women's point of view, I had not gotten angry in the early women's movement about women's liberation. 20 years later, I was pissed. I read an article by a biblical scholar, Elizabeth Schussler Fiorenza, who was then at Villanova and later at Harvard, a Catholic woman. And she had an essay in a collection of early writings, that is 20th century women writing, 21st century women, whenever it was, in the 70s, in the 1970s, there was a collection put together by two women who were at Yale Divinity School. And there was this one essay where Elizabeth Schussler Fiorenza indicated that this one Greek word in the Acts of the Apostles was translated minister when it was referring to a man and servant when it was referring to a woman. And I was angry. I did not want to have anything to do with a Christianity that diminished women even in the words that they use. And it took me a while to find my way back. Interestingly enough, a major player was Elizabeth Schussler Fiorenza's later writings, in which she said, "This Bible is our history too. And you are free, if there's a disciple who isn't named, to think of that disciple as a woman." And I encountered various biblical passages. In the Old Testament, God is like a mother eagle. God is like a mother bear. Pretty fierce, but pretty feminine. The parable of the Good Shepherd, which everybody knows, has been preached upon everywhere in Christianity, is followed by an analogous parable. Right, the next thing, you finish reading the Good Shepherd, you get to the woman who lost a coin and swept her house to find it. I have never heard a sermon on that parable, but it's there. So my anger transformed from "that's not right" to "I have a place." So I came back to Christianity, that is, the way I interpret Christianity, which probably wouldn't pass muster with some other people, but I'm a follower of Jesus. Maybe not a worshiper of Jesus, because I don't think Jesus asked to be worshipped. He asked to be followed. So time went along, and maybe 10 or 15 years ago, I encountered a term. I thought it up, but then I found it in other people's writings, so maybe I didn't think it up, of God as all, capital A, hyphen, that, capital T, hyphen, capital I, is, all that is. And I've coasted along with that until very recently. It's a wholeness. And I discovered that the wholeness is not whole unless it includes me. That didn't make me grandiose. It made me included. I am not outside the divine. I'm included. Everything's included. All things are sacred. You, me, hippopotamuses, the soil bacteria, the farthest out galaxy, all of it. And it's not complete without every single element. So I've grooved along on that, as I say, for 10 or 15 years. And then 3 or 4 years ago, a friend of mine gave me a book titled One, O-N-E, One, by a quantum physicist named Heinrich Pa, a high-level quantum physicist, the kind that does experiments at the Hadron Collider in Switzerland. And he traces the history of quantum physics, which I struggle to comprehend at all. And he interleaves it in his book with readings about spirituality over time, and concludes that the two of them are on an intersecting path of oneness. So I thought that book was interesting. It didn't really change my view of God, but it was cooking along in the back of the brain. Recently, my friend Larry gave me a little tiny volume. It was about this big and about this thick, by Ilia DeLeo, who is a Franciscan nun and a scientist. And she took a much shorter trip through all of quantum physics and the history of science, which I struggled to keep up with. And then, speaking of the experiences of the mystics, who I also had a period of reading all the medieval mystics that I could put my hands on. And she brings it together into what she calls wholeness. And I have found that oneness is slightly different from all that is. It's more somehow to me inclusive, that I am not only included, but I am present with all that, the rest of it, and it is present to me. And I had a morning within the past 6 months where this light bulb went on for me, which is, I think, somewhere between heresy and atheism, that the God we talk about is a projection of humans. We are not in the image of God. We have created a God in our image. And I was done with it. Except I found out I didn't know how to be done with it. I'd had that image all my 70-some years. So, on the belief level from here up, I believe in oneness. On the heart level, I resonate to oneness. On the spiritual practice level, I'm a little lost. If I don't have that somebody that I'm talking to. So I spent last Sunday yesterday in meeting for worship with my eyes open. And actually, we have 2 meetings for worship, one out of doors early in the morning and one later indoors. And I tend to attend both of them. So in the outdoors, I was looking at the clouds and this magnificent 2-year-old sugar maple tree and the squirrels and the people going by, the cars going by in the street. And kind of feeling our kinship, that I'm connected to the clouds and the tree. And it brought to mind Francis of Assisi and Brother Sun and Sister Moon and Sister Water. And then I went inside and I started looking at the furniture. The building is 150 some years old, 160 years old now. And I looked at this one bench where nobody was sitting. That is one plank that's 18 inches wide. That was a big tree. And I went into that plank. Who sawed it? Who took it and put it into where did the tree grow? Who cut it down? Who sawed it? Who made it into part of a bench in Newtown Friends Meeting House? Who has sat on it in the last 160 years? And then I just looked around other elements of the space and went into them and the people and had an image, somewhat of a forced image. It was, what if, as I'm looking at everybody sitting on the benches across from me, our meeting house is in a square, so you're looking at the other people. So I'm looking at the people across from me, the bench, they're on the window behind them. And I thought about, what if it was like a watercolor where you put extra water on it and the edges start to bleed. So they start to blur and run into one another. So that's where I am. My current theology, which may be good for the rest of my life or for the next 2 days, is oneness. And I just feel like I have so much I can explore in that and learn from, and maybe find how it relates to my earlier experiences of guidance, of voices that have spoken to me. I just think there's a lot of room to run around in there, and I'm going to learn a lot until something else opens.
There's so much we could explore in what you've talked about. I don't know how much we want to go into theology intellectually, but maybe you could talk about, you talked about it a little bit, what it meant for you psychologically to conceive of God as all that is. And you talked about how you felt accepted and included. So all that is wholeness, to conceive of God as all that is and wholeness. Does that mean that even my, case in point, laziness, even my shortcomings, everything about me, even my difficulties, even my deepest, darkest thoughts, even the evil in the world, is all of that included? Is all of that somehow sacred?
I fantasize showing up at the pearly gates and asking God, why has this been so hard? Why did all those bad things happen? I don't understand it, but bad things happen. Cruelty happens, war happens, people die. It's part of the wholeness. It's part of the oneness. I don't understand it. But in terms of my being accepted, I want to touch back on a couple of other things I've mentioned. One was the reading women's theology. Because I have a degree in religion, all of the books we read were male theologians. And I just had this feeling that I didn't fit quite into that theology. And I thought there was something wrong with me. And I carried that my spirituality was okay, but inferior somehow. So when I read all this women's stuff, the women that created the church meal in the lower level, the communion goes on upstairs and downstairs. Oh, I began to feel that I wasn't wrong or incomplete or inadequate. I was a woman. And if people find help from God as Almighty and a warrior and a judge, and that, I don't have any problems with that. It's not me, and God has a place for me. That was such a big change that I forgot about it until I was preparing for this and Googled myself and found a story about that. And I was talking to my daughter. I said, I have so incorporated that in myself that I forgot that period of struggle. Similarly, I just have had a little tiny inferiority complex. It hasn't covered my life, but something about me that's just not quite good enough. And when I blend into oneness, that goes away. I am what I am. I am what I am today. I'll be what I am tomorrow. Or maybe all of those me's have been there all along altogether. And they're all in there. And that's the way it is. And I might get better. I might get worse. I don't know. But whatever it is, I'm still there. I'm in the in crowd with everybody else.
Yes. Yeah. I'm reminded of, I think I may be incorrect in saying this, but I think it was Richard Rohr, a Catholic theologian. He's a Franciscan. He talks about how our anthropology, our psychology, our sociology, all of that is dependent on our theology, how we view God, how we understand God. And from that, we derive how we understand ourselves, how we understand our mind, how we understand our behavior, how we understand humans, how we understand human society. So reading theology written by women and beginning to see these other aspects of God that are traditionally not only confined to masculine, but thought of as feminine, I can see how that would have an effect on the psyche and your view of the world, that, oh, all of this is also included. I don't have to leave this out. All of this, all of me is included.
All of God is included.
Right. That's what I also enjoyed about reading your article that you sent me, that you're not saying that God is either masculine or feminine, but when we look at God through the feminine lens, we begin to see there are other aspects and qualities that become apparent. So we include all of God, the wholeness of God. What's also I don't know if it's a tension at this point for you, but all that is and oneness, it's a classic paradox in certain schools of Hinduism, in the Upanishads, in Vedanta. And on the one level, all that is God. Everything that exists is God. All that is God. But it's not a big logical jump then to say that only God exists. If all that is God, is only God exists. Nothing but God exists. There's only one here. There's nothing else. And
you can name it anything you want to.
yeah. And so for certain schools of Hinduism, multiplicity is in the ultimate analysis is an illusion. It's an artifact of perception that we then divide. And so I think you're seeing that in your watercolor, where everything bleeds into every other thing. But that even that would presuppose that things exist independently to bleed into each other, whereas there's only one.
I sometimes, depending on the context, hesitate to use the word God because it carries so much baggage. So many people define God in probably thousands of different ways. And some of those ways are stumbling blocks for other people.
Mm-hmm.
But oneness, your language, that it's all God or God is the one, I just leave the word out. And swim in that pool. That's actually an image that just came back to me from my early time as a Quaker, of feeling that when I went deep, I was underwater. I was in a body of water, body of clear water. Breathing didn't seem to be a problem. Then a teacher spoke about the stream, and I thought, no, mine isn't a stream. Mine's a pool. And I think that may be a difference between how a woman and a man might perceive a body of water. But I feel right now in oneness that is this massive something that I can swim around in. And now there's another thing that I picked up from quantum physics. I think even most of us ignorant people like me can understand this idea that when they're studying electrons, and if they use a certain measuring device, it's a wave. But if they use a different measuring device, it's a particle. So from that, I have extrapolated with absolutely no authority to come to these conclusions that we experience the world we call our reality, the solid things we touch, the things we see, are the result of the tools we have. We have 5 senses, maybe 6. And so these manifestations appear because that's the device we have to recognize them.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there are other planes, or maybe there's some place that your consciousness goes, after you leave this body, where you experience something really different. When my cousin was dying last year, I asked her to send me a note about what she found, but she hasn't done it.
Yes, and about the point about the sense organs, in some sense, they filter reality or shape how we perceive reality. And in some sense, that's how, in various Buddhist and Hindu schools, spiritual practice is seen as how do we encounter reality without the obstruction of these filters, reality as it is, rather than as mediated by the sense organs, including in Buddhism, the mind is a sense organ. So our thoughts filter how we perceive reality, and we see, because if we believe I'm not worthy, we see reality in a certain way. But how does reality look when you let go of that thought that I'm not worthy? How does reality look when you let go of that thought that I'm not included? What does the world look like then? So beyond all conceptual formations and beyond all sense organs, what is reality? That seems to be, in many cases, the spiritual endeavor. I want to... So we've talked about a few things. One, when you had this realization with this visual vision that you were safe, you're completely safe. And then you had this realization as you were exploring theology of that you are included, you're accepted. And then you've talked about, I think in one of the, maybe in Wooed by the Spirit, you talked about this other insight that you had, that intelligence and hard work are not sufficient, or are, maybe I'm not phrasing it correctly. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Oh, yes. I think at the age of 42, you learn the lesson that intelligence and hard work do not always win the day.
So, and that it also says in that writing, some people learn this when they're in the
Yeah.
first grade or
And some people
earlier.
never learn it.
So, um, I have always been a good, obedient girl. I have tried to do everything right. Um, and I had a job that was, it was impossible. I was asked to lead a small organization that had a big mandate and a very small budget, and it wasn't going to happen. But I poured myself into it. I had an image of having a direct transfusion, that there was a into my vein and into the organization. It wasn't enough. And so, but I had a leading that I had to stay in the job till I learned what I was there to learn.
Let me pause. Leading. What does leading mean? That you had a guidance?
A guidance.
Yes.
More Quaker language. So here I am stuck in this job, which I increasingly dislike. And I'm trying to figure out what it is I'm supposed to learn so I can get out of here. So a friend of mine gave me a book. So I'm reading through this book. It didn't have anything to do with what I was supposed to learn. Exactly. But as I read it, it dawned on me that hard work and diligence and all that isn't enough. And I was lying in bed reading. My husband and I were propped up on our cushions reading. And I turned to him and I said, "That's it." And he looks at me like, "In the middle of what conversation are we?" And I said, "That's the answer." Whatever it was you just read, I can't remember my own words. Hard work isn't enough. And he goes, meaning, you got it. You know, like you're doing charades, that means you got the answer. And I lean back. Well, what does that mean? The next day, I got a phone call at work from my college roommate telling me that there was a place in the collective community she lived in. A person wanted to go away for a year, and his apartment would be available. And would it be okay if he left his furniture and his dishes? And she knew that I was preparing, that as soon as I learned whatever this was, I was going to take a year off. And I accepted. I instantly knew that his furniture and dishes would be quite helpful. And I was done. I was done with that job. I gave a reasonable period of notice and tidied up what I was doing, and I was out of there. So that there needs to be something underneath the hard work to have a really positive impact. So I'm going to tell you quickly about 2 phases of my life. So that time, quitting that job, ended my learning how to be a grown-up phase of life. And for the next 20 years, I did not have full-time employment. My husband is a very kind, generous, and patient man. I did many things, all of which centered around deepening my spiritual life. That included all that reading in women theology. It included all the reading the mystics. It included clerking the meeting at Central Philadelphia, which was it was the best school of the spirit because I had to love everybody in my meeting and help things go forward. And that wasn't always easy. So all those things happened. I traveled in the Quaker ministry, meaning I went to meetings around the country with various talks that I was able to give. Then I got lured into raising money for a green building. And that was about 20 years later, a new phase of my life, where after the 3 years that I raised money and another year, I was asked to head up the organization. So here I was, an administrator again. But I was an administrator who had spent 20 years cultivating her spiritual life. And I believe this is a big thing for a person to say about herself. I believe that I exemplified the best of being a Quaker administrator because I brought both energies to the work. And I did well, and I was recognized for it. One of my favorite things was being able to say no to somebody and have them say thank you. Which was to be very empathic about what they wanted and why I couldn't give it. And even at my retirement celebration, a vendor attended somebody I had dumped 2 years earlier because he saw the rightness of why what he was doing for our organization didn't live up. So that is the, and I feel like I'm at the end of that next 20-year period and wondering what God has for me next. But these 20 years of working, leading organizations, being diligent, having expectations, having responsibilities, but also having it be acts of love. That's the product of that insight back then.
So hard work.
1986 or something, 1989.
So hard work, intelligence, talent, they're not sufficient unless they come from a place of deep spiritual cultivation, which you went through after you quit that job when you were 42. So unless they come from a place of deep spiritual cultivation and as an expression, what you called acts of love, as an expression of love, of that cultivation, would that be good summary?
Well, something like that. All those skills and tools are not bad. They're useful. But they gain another energy when undergirded with spiritual insight and love. And I have enough people who know me well enough who will tell you I don't always operate that way. But I intend it. And sometimes I get there.
Mm-hmm. And when I initially read what you had written about hard work and intelligence, I read it a little bit differently. So I was expecting this conversation to go a little bit differently. What I thought it was about control. And this is something we've talked about, my wife and I have talked about quite a bit, is that what can we control? And it's quite evident to us, and this is also something the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita, talks about quite a bit, that we do not have any control over the results of our action. No matter how well we do an action, no matter how much sunlight, water, manure, everything I give to the plant, I cannot determine that the fruit will emerge. That's beyond what I as a human can control. However, based on what you said about love and spiritual cultivation, it is also true that if I act out of love, then the reward is the action itself. I don't have to wait for a fruit. That in acting out of love, I have already received the reward, which is love itself.
Now, in different times in my life, in that period when I was cultivating, I was also meeting with people and helping them, and I had no investment in what they did next. We talked. I've shared what I had to share. They went on, and whatever it was good for me. But then I got a job again. And when you're an administrator, you need people to do things your way or somewhat like your way. And so they're both there. So on the one level, you're still telling people what to do, and you're still expecting an outcome that you have more or less predetermined. But that other stuff, the relationship stuff, how people feel about working in that place and working with me is in that mystery range. They're both going on together. My husband, who studies Buddhism, and he's a Quaker, but, we're eclectic, he constantly cites an adage, which is every event is the result of an infinite number of causes and conditions. And every event is one of the infinite number of causes and conditions for what happens next. And that's the degree to which I have agency as a little speck in oneness. I do stuff, it has an effect. Is it a very big effect? I don't know. What effect is it? I don't know. Sometimes you find out about effects that you go, I did that. So, yeah.
Yes, and it's so I feel moved to say this. Let's say you started with the God with the white beard floating in the sky, and then arrived at God is love and all that is to oneness. And I don't know if I ever had a period of God with the floating man with long white beard phase.
Yeah, well, you grew up in a different tradition.
I did, and which had its own paradoxes for me to resolve. But God is love. That is still my. If I have a definition of God, that is still my definition, and it is inclusive of God as all that is and God as oneness. So what happened in my case is not that I gave up on God as love, but that as my understanding of God evolved, I began to see that my understanding of love has also evolved. What I previously thought of as love, now love is inclusive of oneness. Love, all of it is love. There is nothing but love. And so in that sense too, when I have acted out of love, as you call that, acts of love, then it's as if the oneness is expressing itself through me, in me. And when I deviate from it, and even that, I can see that in a deeper level is somehow still searching for that love, is asking for that love, is misplaced, misguided.
I think that's true of the bad guys.
Yeah, I think so.
The murderers, the dictators who are cruel.
Yeah.
I think everybody is always trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes their perception is cramped up. Young teenagers who are in gangs, who are taught in the gang that you shoot first. Don't take a chance, shoot first. They're doing the right thing in that context. And we can only hope that all of us gradually broaden our context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very well said. And yeah, that's what Socrates said. Everyone's doing the good, they just don't know what it is. And that everyone seeks happiness in some way, but they think they'll find it in money or somehow in perverted way in killing others or harming others. But everyone is seeking in the deepest way the same thing, the one. I do want to get back to guidance again. So could you give us an example of, I love this, bait and switch?
Well, one was my idea that I was going to work for the environment, and I ended up being a fundraiser. I had no plans to be a fundraiser. I had done little minor things around fundraising. This time I raised $4 million with the help of a good guide, a good helper, advisor. Was this a bait and switch? I retired from paid work and felt that somehow something was going to come. And so a month after I retired, I went for 2 weeks with my sister and a friend to France. And I got back, and my grandson, who was on the autism spectrum, he was, I think, 6 or so at the time, very high on the autism spectrum. You wouldn't immediately recognize him as being on the spectrum, fell on the stairs and got a concussion, which caused him to become violent. And my daughter was fearful that she couldn't even take him to an appointment because maybe he'd attack her when she was driving. And so I, leaving my comfortable house, was on the train platform at 7 a.m. 3 days a week to go up to the suburb where they lived to help care for my grandson and the other 2 children. And we saw a pediatric sports medicine specialist, whoever thought there was such a person like that, who said that if you have something not right in your brain and it gets injured, it exacerbates your condition, makes it much worse, and that it will resolve as the concussion heals. And that's how it turned out. But that got me moved from the house I was going to live in for the rest of my life, which we had renovated as our forever home. We sold it and moved to the suburbs so we could be close to them and help with those issues.
So, yeah.
So here I am.
So bait and switch would be you think you're deciding for one reason, which seems to be an attractive reason at that point, but later you realize, oh, that was not what this was about.
Maybe I felt a deep sense of guidance to the thing number 1 that turned into thing number 2.
Yeah. And I've always thought of this as, so after my undergraduate, I did my undergraduate 3 years in New Jersey, 1 in Wisconsin. And after my undergraduate, I didn't know what to do with my life. So I applied for a master's program in religious studies. And I went to Atlanta, the Georgia State University. And in my mind, I was there to do masters. But the first day of our orientation, I met a friend in my cohort. And yeah, he changed my life forever. He was the first truly sincere. Prior to that, I literally believed that I was the most spiritual person in the world. But seeing him for the first time, I realized I have no idea what humility is, what sincerity is, he was a loner for the most part, but he spent time with me for 2 years during my master's, and that changed my life forever. And I always saw that as I had no idea what I was doing, yet something was unfolding that was bringing, and it was very rare to meet this person. Both of us were reading the same teacher at that point, same spiritual teacher who no one had heard about at that point. So I feel like, when I read Bait and Switch that you've written, that was it.
You got your master's degree.
I did. And then I didn't know what to do, so I applied for a doctorate.
And now you have a job, eh?
I do. I tried to quit the doctorate too, multiple times. It is strange how things unfold. And what I have realized too, reading your the wooed by the Spirit is that in some sense there are no mistakes. It's as if we trust completely, there are no mistakes. Everything somehow leads to something greater and higher if we are willing to be led. Would you agree?
You may not know what that something is.
Mm-hmm.
You just take one step after the other, doing the best you can every day with the best intentions you can muster that day. And sometimes there are consequences. I've had a couple of times when somebody came up and thanked me for something that I didn't remember doing.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't important to me, but it was important to them. How many times a day might we do something that is either helpful or harmful to somebody that we're oblivious of?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You just have to keep going and hoping for the best, hoping that the that and God of God in you is expressing itself and not some of the other sources of impulses that one has.
Have you had instances where either that you misinterpreted or misunderstood a guidance, or that you thought it was a guidance and followed it, but it wasn't so?
I don't think I've reflected on it in that framework. I think I just take the next step.
Mm.
So all the bait and switch, all the surprises, all the leadings to do what, are just part of the process.
Yeah.
Some of them fizzle. I think I'm doing it, nothing happens. Sometimes some guy calls me up and asks me to do a podcast. You know what?
Yet here we are. It reminds me of, and this is something we've thought about. When I say we, my wife and I, we've thought about. But it reminds me of, I forget who talked about this. Maybe it was a poker player, a professional poker player, who talked about this. But they said, you don't measure a good decision based on the outcome, but rather a good decision is a decision which, when making the decision, you did your due diligence. Similarly, it seems like true guidance is where all you can do is have that spiritual cultivation, have that inner place of silence, and be sincere in your practice. And then it's not about the outcome, but it's whether or not you've done your due diligence, and then testing the guidance with companions and sitting with it.
And sometimes it's a clinker. You do something I hope I haven't done anything that's been truly harmful to another person. But I know there's some people that don't especially like me. It's not perfection. You do something, and every event is the result of an infinite number of causes and conditions, and it causes something else, and then there's a lot of other conditions that come in with what I've done, and something else happens, and some of it's good, and some of it may not be as good as it could have been.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Would you, and you use this, I think I wrote it down when you said it, marries as a spiritual discipline. Would you talk about that?
It's an article I wrote that I didn't look up again, so I'm not 100% sure what I said. But my sense is, here you are with another person. Nobody's really a soulmate. You've got differences. And you learn from them. You make space for them. We give each other a lot of space. We've been 4 years in this retirement community. A person came up to me a couple of weeks ago and said, I didn't know you and Brett were married to each other. He does his things, I do my things. We get together at home. Sometimes we go out together. It's all right. So, finding those things, those places where you mesh, the places where you don't mesh, where your spirituality, his spiritual life has evolved very differently from mine. Sometimes we sit and talk about it and we get on a wavelength where we're quite together. And there's some places where it's not a match. What he thinks about it is so different from my experience. Who's right? So just being present to one another, accepting, dealing with the bumps. A friend of mine recently died at age 101 and a half. And she had written in her 75th anniversary of marriage a set of guidelines for marriage. And one of them is of something that happened around which there's conflict. It happened. Don't waste time finding who caused it, who's to blame. Figure out what you do next. So that's part of her marriage as a spiritual discipline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Also because every happening has infinite causes and conditions.
Causes an infinite number of consequences.
Yes. Yes. What is the lesson at this stage of your life? What are you being taught?
Well, I've been taught about oneness. I feel like I'm moving into a next 20-year phase. Probably won't be any longer than that. Where I'm back in that more amorphous phase where I'm not in charge of anything. Where I'm having more conversations with people like you. Invitations to write something. On December 29th, my voice reduced itself to something that sounded like this. And it took me a while to find somebody who could give me the voice training to bring my voice back. I had to live with the possibility that I would lose my voice altogether through paralysis of my vocal folds. Now there's a lesson. So I considered, how would I live? There's an awful lot of my life that is around speaking. And I thought, well, some people can't walk, some people can't see, some people can't hear. This isn't as bad as some of them. I'll figure it out. I'll learn something. It'll be my teacher. I don't know if it's permanently back. Also, I'm old. Other parts are going to fall off. That's the way it is. Things wear out. I don't know how that will be. I've been blessed with good physical health, and I'm very grateful for that. But that might change. It likely will change. At some point, I'll at least die. So who knows what this next stage will teach me and what it will ask of me. There are many who believe, and I've been receiving this from disparate sources, that we're about to have a great shift in human consciousness, but that it will be painful. And that being spiritually grounded will both help cause it, help smooth it, and help be present to people going through it. I don't know if all these sources are wishful thinking. I don't know if this is coming. But we're going through a pretty hard time globally right now. And maybe I have a job to do. I don't know. Stay tuned. Call back.
Does the thought of death come to you often? Do you worry about death, or?
No.
Do you think it's safe?
I don't worry about it. I think about it more. You know, when you're 20, you're going to live forever. My husband's 10 years my senior. He says, well, I've got no more than the fingers on my two hands. So I know that I don't have the space out there that I once had. And the end will come. I have no idea. Maybe I'll be hit by a truck tomorrow. Maybe I'll die in bed. Old, demented. I hope if I'm old and demented, I'll be one of those cheerful and kind demented people and not one of the ones who discovered their angry side. But I don't know.
But you feel a sense of the same safety you talked about earlier with this issue as well. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And maybe the wild animals will come and tear me limb from limbs at any time.
And yet you're still safe. You will still be safe.
Still safe.
Yes.
And
yes.
I'm very curious about what happens after that.
I have two more questions. Well, I asked what would have been the last question first. The last question would have been, what would you, if you were writing your autobiography, what would you title it?
Well, I think that paper, Wooed by the Spirit, isn't bad. But I'd have to get into the writing and let it tell me.
The same way you do your journaling. Yes. Yeah. And the last question then is, do you pray? What does prayer mean to you now at this time?
Oh, well, that's what I talked about a while back in this conversation. I have to learn something new about prayer. I'm pretty sure that there's not a God that I dial up and say, would you give me a better day tomorrow than I had today? I just don't think that's the way it works. But I think there's something in oneness that is different from prayer as an activity. It may be submission, participation. I'm telling you these things, they're coming into my mind right now. I haven't thought about this question very much, but I have thought that how I relate to the oneness, God, all that is different in the oneness from the habits I've had for a lifetime. And I don't know how I will release those habits and discover something else.
When you put it that way, it sounds quite exciting. The adventure that awaits. Yeah.
I'm not dead yet.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Pat. I am so grateful that I found your video on YouTube, and then I reached out, and then I've had a chance to connect with you and get to know you, and today I have this conversation. Thank you for sharing your experience, your guidance, your insights. Thank you for being a wise elder. Thank you. And thanks to Larry as well. I'm tired. Look to the
Keep on,
side.
Larry. Put yourself on the picture.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you for holding us both in light.
Likewise. Man.